In conclusion, we have learned, first, we see what it means to abide in Christ. John 15:4 and 5 shows us we will not have spiritual fruit if we do not abide in Christ. We learn that we need to know God in order to abide in Christ. We need to understand the power of the gospel for redemption and for being set free from sin and life in order to abide in Christ. We see what is true for us as followers of Christ when we have the privilege of responding to God in obedience because of what Christ has done for us. Second, we see why we should abide in Christ. We learn that we should abide in Christ because we can do nothing of spiritual benefit outside of Christ. We see that we will not bear fruit in the Spirit if we do not abide in Christ. We will end up being separated from God if we do not abide in Christ. We want to respond more like Peter and not like Judas when we make bad choices. We have the opportunity to choose to seek Christ even when we fail. He loves us and wants us to come back and keep going according to His will and grace. Next, we saw when we abide in Christ that the conclusion is we are to abide all the time. Abiding in Christ should be like when we breathe. It is something we do all the time that keeps us alive. Life is not to be separated from the spiritual and secular, but we are to abide in Christ in all areas of life. Christ is the center of all that we do. Finally, we looked at how we can abide in Christ. Some methods were given to abide in Christ. These were prayer, reading the Bible, loving God, loving others. Remember, these are simply pathways to abiding in Christ. They are not a law to keep or a way to appease God. We looked at 3 different scriptures. Hebrews 12:1 and 2 gives good insight into how we can abide in Christ. It shows the importance of having Jesus and the gospel be a part of every aspect of our lives. We abide in Christ by making Christ the treasure of our hearts. We saw this in Matthew 6:19 and 20. We abide in Christ by letting Christ be strong in our weakness. We see this in 2 Corinthians 12:9 and 10. This is a basic starting place to begin to abide in Christ. As you think about what, why, when, and how of abiding in Christ, this will enable you to keep in the calling of making disciples that multiply. If you don't do this, you will not be able to make disciples of Jesus that will multiply, or that will be able to last for very long. So in concluding, I hope this is a great starting place for you to begin abiding in Christ and getting involved in making disciples that multiply.